Grow your practice, grow your wealth, grow your impact. Find out how to spend less time in the dental chair and more time on the things you love.
Welcome back to the Dental Wealth Podcast. With me in the studio, as always, is the man, the myth, the legend, the magnificent Eric J. Morin.
Glad to be here. Ready for a great podcast on a beautiful, crisp morning here in Georgia. I don't know what the Dallas weather's like, but I'm going to tell you now, it's getting cold in Georgia.
It's feeling nice. When I left, we went to Indianapolis last week. When I left, it was 93 or something like that. But as soon as we got back, it's like the Indianapolis weather came with me. So it's been pretty chilly out here. But I like it. I mean, if you guys are watching live right now via YouTube, you're seeing one heck of a turtleneck. Let me tell you, this thing looks like it's cashmere. It looks freaking saucy. And that's a business term, saucy.
That's 2 podcasts out of like 3 weeks that I've wore a turtleneck. And I think I've only wore a turtleneck twice in the last 20 years. So there you go.
Maybe Eric's neck's cold. His neck's cold these days.
I'm in my Steve Jobs era. I don't know what to tell you.
The Steve Jobs era. We're promoting, hashtag turtleneck
I got to take off the jacket for the Steve Jobs, right? So then, you just got to do the turtleneck and the turtleneck only. And,
yes.
And I do have a black turtleneck, but this one isn't black. But you'll have to go on the YouTube to see what color it is.
I think your pants are a little too fancy too, because you need those old raggedy, light wash jeans to go with it, and the New Balance sneakers.
Yeah, some beat up jeans and the New Balance. Yeah,
the lawn mowing shoes. Well, I'm glad to be back in the studio. We had a long trip out to Indianapolis. We were at the Solea Summit, learning about what an impressive laser that's going to be for the marketplace. If you guys haven't researched it, go ahead and research Solea. Learn more about the laser. But that's not the topic for today. I'm going to throw a little curveball at you. So I
have no idea what he's talking about. I have no idea. He was like, "You want me to tell you what we're going to talk about today?" I said, "No, just shoot it." I have no idea what he's going to say.
So the other day, I was driving to Baton Rouge from Dallas, and I was listening to the Joe Rogan podcast. So I always like to listen to other podcasts, see what they're doing, see what their setup looks like, those type of things. And he was interviewing Adam Sandler. So in the interview with Adam Sandler, they were talking about how early on in their career, they basically would tell themselves that they were an amazing comedian, that they were basically hot shit when they would go up there. And they started getting into the conversation of mindset and how important it is for you early on to almost fake it till you make it. A lot of times, people don't believe they can accomplish things early on, and that has lasting effects on their future. So I thought it'd be a great conversation for us to talk about, how, early on in your career, for those of you that are either starting a dental practice or have already started a dental practice, you need to start thinking from a different mindset. So what are your thoughts on the Sandman ultimately saying you have to fake it till you make it in the beginning in order to reach that success?
I think it's intentionality. So, for instance, when I am walking on stage, there's an overwhelming thought that's in my brain. And I don't even know that I would say fake it until you make it. I think I would say be intentional in your mindset and thoughts. So if you're walking to see a patient and let's just say that you're just running into the room, right? You're not really focused. You did, some type of a review of x-rays, those types of things, and you come in the room. You're probably not walking into the operatory thinking, I'm going to look like the absolute authority today in X area, right? It's more or less just reacting and going with what's next and moving on and kind of going through your regular routine. But there's an intentionality of walking there and say, okay, I'm going to walk in there like I'm the best damn dentist in the world. I'm going to have, a confidence around this procedure. I'm going to tell the patient exactly what to do. And, I'm going to make sure they're moving forward. And so that's completely different mindset than walking in a reactive state, asking questions, quickly reacting, trying to get, to a diagnosis and then moving on to the next patient. There's a completely different mindset. So I think the argument is that if you walk onto the stage and the dental operatory is your stage and My stage is a physical stage, and then other people's stages are different things. But if you walk into that stage with the right mindset of, I'm going to be X or I'm going to be Y. So for instance, I'm going to be funny. Like I'm going to be freaking hilarious. Like go back to your example. Like I'm the funniest guy in the freaking world. Like I'm going to walk up there. Like I'm hilarious. There's something that gets released in you where you're like, hell yeah. And you just let it out and you laugh and you don't care because you're mentally doing that. If you walk up to the stage in an energy of being timid, of being scared, of nervousness, not because you don't know your content as a comedian, but if you walk up and you're kind of more of a nervous state, you're just going to come off different. Not because of the fact that you don't have the ability to deliver, but because of the mindset is one of fear, one of focus on what if someone doesn't laugh, what if somebody doesn't, what if I don't get the reaction? If you're thinking about that when you walk on stage, right, then you're not going to have the same results. So there is something about, once the marketplace tells you you're the best, then maybe at some point you walk in there with the confidence that's different. But I think that it's important, and I know that I have an overwhelming thought when I walk on stage. And I keep that thought in the back of my head, and I go back at the end of the day and ask myself, is that what came across? And so I think that knowing what that is, and I think it's important for dentists, and especially when you're training associates too. One of the challenges with newer associates is an associate who's timid, who's scared to look salesy, who doesn't have the confidence, who, those types of things, versus one of walking into the operatory with complete confidence. Because the patient doesn't know, and the patient doesn't know what they're supposed to do, and the patient doesn't know if they can afford it, and the patient doesn't know all these things. But when you walk in with an air of confidence into that room, people are going to move forward or not move forward based on that confidence, based on the energy you bring. If you're reactive and you're like, well, look, we could do this, we might need to do this. Talk to Tina on the way out and see if she can get you scheduled. It's a different aura and a different way to handle yourself than walking in with confidence and slowing down for a minute and just look, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and I say we're going to do instead of this is what we should do, because you're the doctor, and say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and extract this tooth. We're going to place an implant. This is what it's going to look like. We're going to get you in next week. I think I've got some time on Thursday. I want you to move things around to be here. We need to get this done sooner than later. And if you start talking to a patient in a way of confidence and thinking, maybe walking into the room thinking like, I'm the authority in this. Like, I'm going to make sure when I come across to the patient that I am the authority and I'm the expert and they should listen to me, or whatever it ends up being. That overwhelming thought going into that operatory will make a difference.
And that's, and part two of it was Adam was saying ultimately, he was like, I used to call my buddies up because he's like, I made a bad decision when I left high school. I told all my friends that I was going to be the most successful comedian and actor to ever live. Like, I made that assumption, like I just threw it out in the atmosphere. And then he was like, I would call him on the road, and after I just bombed a set, I would call my friends and they'd be like, how's it going? He'd be like, I just totally killed this set. And he would basically fake it till he makes it, because he was putting it in the atmosphere that he was going to be successful. So I know there's a lot of people that, believe in those type of things, that, you attract what you become. You've always said that too. So he used to put it out in the atmosphere that he was going to be the best, that he's working at it behind the scenes, but he's putting it in the atmosphere and hoping that it comes back to him. So can you talk about that a little bit too, when it comes to, we see this all the time in practices, you attract what you become. If you are the practice you are now is the culmination of the resources you put around you, around the people that you've put around you. So talk a little bit about that, because I think it's important for the listeners to hear.
I think that one, you've got to know where you're going, right? So you just said that, comedians knew that they wanted to be the top. Whatever that looked like. Jerry Seinfeld was very clear about what he wanted for his career, right? Chris Rock was new. These guys knew what they wanted to be, and they were focused in. And, even he's on Saturday Night Live. It's not easy to get on Saturday Night Live. You have to understand that these people are focused and they're driven. And the question first I would ask is where you're going. Because if you don't know what that looks like, I'm not really sure how you're going to get there if you have no clue. So it's hard to be in a persona that you have no idea what the persona that you're striving for is. So first of all, what's that persona? And when I speak about persona, what I mean literally is like, Is it that you have $100 million organization? Is it your, I think people, I'll give you an example, and I'll be very just vulnerable for a second. I mean, it's not that deep, but vulnerable nonetheless. So I was, when I was a young man, I grew up in a very blue collar family. My dad was a mechanic, mom a nurse, and we didn't have a lot of extra means growing up. And we lived in a place, this area we lived in my hometown was called the Square, and there was a lot of money in the Square, and so I saw a lot of the country club kids and the kids that their parents bought them brand new cars when they were 16 and all those types of things. And they would go to these country clubs, or they would go this and that. And, I don't know why, but at a young age, I was like, man, I want those things, because we're trying to get grocery money together. Like we don't, and they're getting brand new, and some of these kids parents were ball players and stuff. And I get that. As I grew up, I thought to myself, well, I want to be in that ilk. I want to be able to be in, speak the same language, talk to the same people. And that was the epitome of, to me, is so much of success as a man. And I say a man because I saw myself with like my male buddies playing golf on in the country club. I guess that was my thing. But as I've aged and I've gotten older, that to me is such a sedentary life. And not to knock anybody, that might be your thing. And this is kind of what I'm getting to a point, being vulnerable, is just saying, that's not for me. Like I was just saying to someone recently, I was like, I'm not a country club person. That's my thing. My thing is hanging out with successful people who are driven and want to create amazing things in this world. And the idea of sitting at a country club and drinking beer or whatever 4 days a week just blows my mind. It's not for me. Okay. Now, the reason I say that is important is to say that if your persona is, I want to sit at the country club and drink beer 4 days a week, and that's the epitome of everything, then the message falls short in some ways, right? Because you're like, well, I've already got there, Eric. I've got the country club membership, and as long as I can retire and drink beer 4 days a week and sit at the country club with my friends, then when we ask you to have a different persona, it's a little bit more challenging, because your persona, and maybe that's my own mindset, is that your persona is not high enough. And the ascension should be higher than that. But maybe for you, if that's fine, if you want $5 or $10 million or whatever the number is in a retirement account, and you say, hey, playing golf 4 days a week, then I guess you have that persona. But I would still even argue in that persona, you need to step up the game in that persona, because you'll be there, at a higher rate if you have the right persona. And so there's an identity with that. My identity is way past of what I saw as a young man, thinking that was the epitome. Because I saw these people growing up and I wanted to be in their families in an economic sense. And now as an adult, I go, well, I don't really want that. That's so far away from where I want in life. I don't want to spend time with people that are just sitting around all day long. I want to spend time with people that are changing the world. So then I ultimately speak in a language and speak and have a mindset around those types of people, so I can be in the rooms of the people that are changing the world, which means I have to have a mindset, a moonshot mindset, as Diamantis would say, around greater good. And that's where my mindset has to be. And if you do that, then you're going to attract those people, because when you're in the room with those people, you'll be having the conversation they want to hear, be a part of. Now, the annoying part is if you go to the country club now and you start having conversations 4 days a week about moonshot ideas, is those people don't want to spend time with you either, right? Because you're like, oh my God, this guy just shut up and have a beer. And I'm getting long-winded and maybe a little bit idealistic, but I think it's important for you to understand that you've got to know where you're going and why you're, like, what your mission, so to speak, on this planet is. And then you've got to start creating resources and putting your mind around exactly what that is. Yeah, that's,
you got to keep telling yourself that too. Like, I think you got to, once you fully commit to who you want to be, or like your vision as a person, not where the business is, but as a person, you got to reaffirm it with yourself on a daily basis. You got to look at yourself in the mirror every morning and say, I'm going to be this person. I'm going to be this person. Like, even talk in the third person, Eric's going to be this person. Matthew's going to be this person. Say that and say, yep, I'm going to do this. Like, challenge yourself. The best thing you can do is go tell a group of people what you're going to be, because then someone's going to hold you accountable for that. You never want to be the person that's like, oh, here he goes again. But if you hit those goals, they're going to be like, this is the guy, like, or this is the gal. Like, this is the person that when he says something or she says something, they're going to do it. So I think there's power in you telling yourself that, but also putting it out in the marketplace, because people are going to hold you accountable for it. I mean, when we do events, we'll say, all right, what are some things that you're going to get accomplished from this event? And everyone in the room will have to go around and say, hey, I'm going to get this done. So when we bring them back in person, we say, did you get this accomplished? And they have to tell the rest of their peers, no, we didn't get this done. It doesn't look the like you feel bad for not getting those things accomplished. So I think when you're setting your mission, you're setting your vision of who you're going to be, I think it's number one, you should always keep reaffirming it with yourself. And number two, you should tell people about it, because that's going to hold you accountable long term.
Well, you are who you think you are. And what I mean by that is, like, Elon Musk was always a billionaire. He always was a billionaire. He just hadn't actualized it yet. And I want you to hear that message. It's like, you already are who you think you are. You just haven't actualized it yet. I mean, but it's true. It really is. It's because you are that person. Whatever you think you are, you are. And then you start to form habits and things that are aligned with that. So who you think you are, you really are that person. And you just because you haven't actualized it yet. I mean, actualizing something is completely different. You have to get on the road to actualization. And I think that that's important to know, is like, are you on the road to actualization? Can you start to create actualization around who you want to become? And as you do that, you'll disassociate with people who are not aligned with who your future self is, and start aligning with the people who are associated with your future self. And look, that can be as simple as walking into an operatory. It really can. It can start today of like, I'm going to walk into this operatory and this is how I'm going to be. And it can be as big as like when you go home, like, this is what you meditate on. It's what you think about. But people don't have a big enough goal in my mind. This is fundamentally where I struggle with some people, because I think their goals aren't big enough. I get the idea of sitting around all day and playing golf 4 days a week or whatever. I mean, I get it. I mean, but good gosh, like, I mean, I don't understand it. I mean, if you retire at 60 years old and you live till, let's just say, healthy 85, I mean, you're just going to play golf for 25 years, 4 days a week, and not get bored to tears? I feel like that 25 years should be put to use to something greater good or something. So I think people think too small. I think that I would challenge people to think bigger. And if they think bigger, they'll be more in line with where they want to be. So I don't know if it's faking it. I would say that you become what your thoughts are, and then you actualize it. And Jerry Seinfeld, if you do, I love Jerry Seinfeld, but more importantly, if you actually research Jerry Seinfeld and you actually look into his background and what he's done and what he's created, like he researches, like, he's always been a great comedian, and he researched the greats. I mean, he knows how to land a joke. Like, Jerry Seinfeld is the wealthiest comedian of all time. And if you actually study Jerry Seinfeld, you'll realize he was always brilliant. Like, because he studied it as an art form. Instead of just getting up there trying to make people laugh, he actually studied the art. He knows the ins and outs of comedy, which is why he doesn't have a lot of cuss words. He doesn't need the cuss words. He's too skilled as a comic. But he was already a skilled comic before he actualized it. Now, he was, and so I think it's just what ends up happening is the question of today is really, where's your mindset? What is your moonshot? What is your what is the big, hairy, audacious goal? I mean, there's two different ways to look at the same concept, which is Diamantis will call it a moonshot. Big, hairy, audacious goal is who did BHAG? I don't know. My brain's slipping right this.
There's a bunch of people that say that term.
But it came from. I'm trying to remember who it came from. But anyhow, I think that look, I think you've got to look at your own life, and you have to think to yourself, what am I trying to become? What am I trying to get accomplished? What is the best version of myself? And, and where is that? And I do think it starts at an opportunity. I think if you're still seeing patients, when you walk in that room, damn it, like be present, like be focused, show up, and it's got to be redundant. I mean, going from operatory to operatory to operatory all day long. I mean, I would give grace to that, but at the same time, like you intentionally decide to show up with who you are or who you want. And by the way, people are always watching anyhow. And the great news is you can actually change who you were by just consistent period over time. One time I heard Dan Sullivan talk about anything qualitative can turn quantitative. And what I mean by that is, okay, so if I said to you, just pick one worker, if you're listening to this, one person who works for you, one of your team members, just pick one of them, right? Got them in your head on a scale of 1 to 10. How good are they at their job? Bam. Like you just turn it quantitative, right? On a scale of 1 to 10, how well do they dress up for work? How do they show up every day? Right? All these things are things that we can start to quantify. Well, how did you come to that assumption? Well, you came to that assumption not because of one day. You came up to that assumption over a long period of time of consistent behavior, day in, day out, day in, day out. You saw consistency in behavior, and then you eventually created a framework of who that person is. And then if I ask you a question, a qualitative question, you can give me a quantitative result. And that's just because you have an accumulation of data points. Well, the same thing can be true in who you become. Is the fact of what happens is I'm starting to create new data points. And so, for instance, if a doctor dresses up in sloppy scrubs every day and has been doing that for 20 years, and you say, well, that's just the person's image. Well, that's not true. That person could start dressing better. And then we've seen it with people who, for instance, lose weight. Like this is maybe a better example. Like somebody's been heavy for as long as we've known them. They get in shape and it's 10 years later. You and I both know somebody, Matthew, that we care not a lot for. And I went in there and it was a men's clothing store in a very fancy area. Anyhow, long story short, I was heavier 10 years ago and I lost a lot of weight. And the guy says to me, he says, Eric, you should keep your fat clothes. That's what he said to me. And I said, oh, really? And he says, yeah, you're going to need them. Well, it's been a decade and I still haven't needed them, but I went in the store for the first time in like years and years the other day, and it looks like he needs them though. So I wanted to say to him, like, look, I still haven't gained that weight back, but it looks like you found it. But I didn't say that.
Yes! That's what I should have said.
I didn't say that.
I mean, that's the negative side of that. I think he probably had told a lot of his customers that very thing, which is like, hey, you're going to need these in 10 years. And that ultimately spilled into his life. Like that crossed over and went into his life. And now he's the one that, needs those clothes because he, if you tell enough people that, you start thinking that too. It's like, well, I'm going to need mine. And then it just starts spilling in. So it's important for you to control kind of what you're putting in the atmosphere, I would say.
Well, and I go back. It was I was on a plane. I remember when I wrote it. I don't recall where I wrote it, but I was on a. What does that sound?
Carolina's got her dogs in here. I'm watching the puppies. The one's freaking coughing right now.
But I didn't know dogs could cough. All right. Okay.
Old dogs can cough.
Anything happens on the Dental Well podcast, you just don't even know. I was like, what in the world? I felt like it was like an old man interference coming through.
Reese, I'm going to have to send you pictures so they can pop up right here and you can see the puppies that I'm dealing with over the next couple of days while the in-laws are on vacation.
That's hilarious. Well, where was I going? Okay, we were talking about, so now I was traveling and I wrote down exactly what I wanted people to see me as. And I remember saying that like, it was like, this is how I want people to see me. And what happened was over time, like that's now how, like I found it like years later. Cause you and I know I have like 100 journals, right? So I did find it and I opened it up to that page. I was like, oh my gosh, I made it all come true. Everything I said I wanted people to see me as, I did become that person. And so now all of a sudden nobody would ever identify me as heavy because I haven't been heavy in over a decade. And so so it does happen over a period of time, right? And as you start to transition to a new way of looking, a new way of acting, a new way of thinking, a new way of addressing people, a new way of whatever, over time, it won't happen in one day. You can't just show up looking sharp one day, or a different mindset, or a great energy, or sleep, or whatever you've got. You can't walk in that day and then all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, doctor's changed. No, of course not. But for yourself and for those others, if you over time have a certain mindset over time, period after period after period after period after period, if that starts to happen over an extended period of time, what ends up happening is eventually people see you differently. And you see yourself differently, which means you start to align behaviors that are aligned with that. Like, so if I have a persona of being healthy and in shape, like, you're never going to ever in a million years see me sit down and eat a bacon cheeseburger with fries. Like, this is never going to happen. It's not aligned with who I want to be from a health standpoint. I know some people right now are so frustrated at me because they're like, I love my burgers and fries. I'm not saying you can't eat burgers and fries. Stay with the story. So you'll start to do things that are aligned with your future self. And I think that as you're building your organization, your dental organization, you have to ask yourself, am I the CEO? Am I the doctor? Am I the leader that people need me to be? And who do I see that future leader to be? And then write it down. Be specific. Like, this person dresses like this. They walk in the room like this. They're an authority in this. They have, you could say, they have amazing business knowledge. They know how to read financials fluently, and can call the accountant out when they think that there's a discrepancy. They're able to inspire new team members when they come on board. They're able to mentor doctors and grow in their clinical skills. They're an amazing spouse. They dress well every day, and when they walk into the room with intentionality, speaking to each patient with compassion and knowledge, with confidence, and then it tells the patient exactly what to do. Like you could create a whole list of these things, and then you could then like daily look at this and be like, does this align? Does this align? Does this align? Well, depends on what you want people to see you as. I mean, if I wear, I saw an ad yesterday, and it was like a financial advisor, but it was like in a t-shirt and jeans. And he was like, I know you expect financial advisors to be in a suit, but I'm in a t-shirt and jeans. I'm like the everyman's like advisor or whatever, right? I mean, I was like, that's a really hell of a way to not have to ever wear a suit. I mean, I think your persona, but I mean, you don't have to go that far to not. If you don't like a suit, don't wear a suit. But if I wore a t-shirt and jeans every day, then everybody would wear a t-shirt and jeans every day eventually. Like, that's like, people see it. And so, but it's also, I should take it up. People see it, but you see it, which is more important. You look in the mirror and see what you see. If your hair is put together, if your skin looks good, if you're not over drinking alcohol, if you're in shape, if you look sharp, if you're confidently, if you had great sleep, like all these things, like, you'll see it. And then you'll start aligning, and then people will see who you become through the process.
Yeah. And I think, I love these podcasts, mindset, you and I can talk about it all day. And it popped up when I was listening to the Joe Rogan podcast. So I think if there's one podcast, to listen to sometimes, there's some great characters on there that you can learn a lot from. And I thought that the Sandman himself would be a great one for us to talk about, so especially as we're ending, 2024, which is crazy to think about. Start looking at your mindset, start figuring out who the people you want around you are, who are you going to be in 2025, and start setting that up for success for next year. So if you guys know of anyone, we always say like, subscribe, and share this with someone that needs to change their mindset. Just share it with your friends, share it with your colleagues, share it with your spouse. This is the reason why we do this, is so you guys can share the message. So, as always, Mr. Morin, it's a pleasure having you in the studio, sir.
Always pleasure being here, my friend.
We will talk to you guys next time. Thank you so much.